The massive crystal towers of Zentaur Prime reached up into the purple sky like giant fingers. Inside the highest tower, 14 alien beings sat around a circular table made of pure energy. They called themselves the Galactic Hegemony Council, and they ruled over most of the known galaxy. Speaker Vex Story stood up from his chair. His blue skin shimmered in the artificial light as he activated the holographic display in the center of the table. The image showed a small yellow star with 9 planets orbiting around it. "Council members," Vex Story said in his deep voice, "today we discuss the primitive system known as Sol. The third planet contains a species that calls itself human." The other council members leaned forward to look at the spinning image of Earth. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had multiple eyes or strange breathing apparatus. But they all shared the same expression of boredom and superiority. "How primitive are they?" asked Councillor Thecalon, a being that looked like a giant insect with wings. Vex Story smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Very primitive. They have only recently learned to leave their planet. Their fastest ships take months to travel between worlds in their own system. Their longest wars last only a few decades. Most amusing of all, they still fight among themselves constantly." The council members made sounds that passed for laughter in their various species. The idea of being still fighting each other instead of being united under council rule seemed ridiculous to them. "What resources does this planet offer?" asked Councilor Morthek, whose species looked like living rocks. "Excellent question," Vex Story replied. He changed the hologram to show detailed scans of Earth. "The planet contains large amounts of rare minerals we need for our shipyards. More importantly, their system sits at the junction of 3 major hyperspace routes. Control of this system would cut travel time between the Outer Rim and core worlds by 30%. The council members nodded. This was the kind of practical thinking they appreciated. The Galactic Hegemony had grown powerful by taking control of useful systems and their inhabitants. They called it integration, but everyone knew what it really meant. "What about their military capability?" asked Councillor Yithara, whose species had evolved from sea creatures and still wore water-filled suits. Vex Story laughed again. "They have no unified world government. Instead, they have nearly 200 separate nations that spend more time arguing with each other than building defenses. Their most powerful weapons are fusion bombs that can destroy cities. Their space navy consists of a few hundred small ships that cannot even reach their nearest star." He changed the hologram again to show human military vehicles. Tanks, jets, and warships appeared in the display, looking tiny and primitive compared to hegemony technology. Their ground vehicles still use chemical propulsion. Their aircraft cannot leave their atmosphere. Their warships are powered by nuclear reactors that we stopped using 10,000 years ago. Council members, these beings are so primitive that our scout ships are invisible to their detection systems. The council members looked at each other with satisfaction. This would be another easy conquest to add to their empire. "How many ships will we need?" asked Councillor Zeftos, whose species resembled tall, thin trees with faces. "Admiral Kethmoran suggests the third fleet," Vex Story replied. 50,000 vessels should be more than adequate. The Admiral expects complete integration within one solar rotation. 50,000 ships for one primitive world? Councillor Thecalon buzzed through his translator. "Is that not excessive?" Vex Story shook his head. "The Admiral prefers overwhelming force. It reduces casualties and speeds integration. Besides, the third fleet needs exercise. They have been stationed at the Outer Rim for too long." The council members considered this. The Galactic Hegemony controlled 847 different species across 12,000 star systems. They had maintained peace and order for over 700 years. Their method was simple. When they found a new species, they offered a choice: join the hegemony willingly and keep some independence, or resist and be conquered completely. Most species chose to join willingly once they saw the size of the hegemony fleet. "Very well," said Councillor Morthek. "Let us vote. All in favor of integrating the Sol system and its human inhabitants?" One by one, each council member pressed a button on their chair. 14 blue lights appeared on the table, indicating unanimous approval. "The motion passes," Vextari announced. "I will contact Admiral Kethmoran immediately. The Third Fleet will begin deployment within the hour." As the council members filed out of the chamber, they chatted casually about other business. The integration of primitive species had become routine over the centuries. Most took less than a day once the fleet arrived. The humans would probably surrender as soon as they saw the ships. None of the council members bothered to read the detailed intelligence reports. If they had, they might have noticed some strange gaps in the data. Their monitoring stations around the Sol system had been operating for months, but there were periods when the signals became unclear. Their analysts had dismissed these as natural interference from the system star. They also might have wondered why a primitive species had such an unusual amount of debris in their space. Earth's orbit was filled with thousands of objects that their sensors identified as ancient satellites and space junk. The humans, they assumed, were too primitive to clean up after themselves. Most importantly, they might have questioned why such a primitive species had such sophisticated communication networks. Earth's internet carried more data traffic than some advanced civilizations. But the Council dismissed this as typical primitive behavior. Young species always talked too much before they learned the value of silence. As Admiral Kethmoran received his orders, he studied the tactical reports with professional interest. The humans had built some defensive installations around their planet, but nothing that could threaten a hegemony fleet. Their space stations were tiny. Their weapons were basic. Their ships were slow and weak. The Admiral had conquered 17 systems in his career. This would be the easiest, yet he gave the order to begin hyperspace transit. 50,000 ships of the Third Fleet powered up their drives and disappeared into the void, heading toward a small yellow star and the primitive world that orbited it. None of them realized that Earth had been watching them for months. Admiral Kethmoran stood on the bridge of his flagship as the Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Through the massive viewing screens, he could see the small yellow star in the distance and the tiny blue-green planet that was their target. "Fleet status report," he commanded. "All 50,000 vessels have arrived safely." "Admiral," reported his communications officer. "No casualties during transit. All ships are battle-ready." Kethmoran nodded with satisfaction. The Third Fleet was the pride of the hegemony military. Its ships ranged from massive dreadnoughts, the size of cities, to swift fighters that could outrun anything the humans might have built. "Begin standard integration protocol," the Admiral ordered. "Send surrender demands on all frequencies. Give them 1 hour to respond before we begin orbital bombardment." The communications officer began transmitting, but after a few minutes, he looked confused. "Admiral, I'm receiving no response from the planet. In fact, I'm detecting no communications at all." "What do you mean?" Kethmoran asked. "Sir, when we approached, the planet was sending out thousands of communication signals. Radio waves, data transmissions, everything you'd expect from a primitive but active civilization. But the moment our fleet appeared, everything went silent." Kethmoran frowned. This was unusual. Most primitive species either tried to communicate frantically or sent panic messages to their military forces. Complete silence was rare. "Perhaps their equipment cannot reach us at this distance," suggested the tactical officer. "We are still 2 light hours from their planet." "Or perhaps they are preparing for battle," Kethmoran said. "Run deep scans of the system." I want to know about every ship, station, and weapon they have." The scanning crews worked for 30 minutes before reporting their findings. What they found was exactly what they expected to find. Earth had several small space stations in orbit. There were a few hundred primitive spacecraft scattered throughout the system. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter contained the usual collection of rocks and mining equipment. "Nothing that poses any threat to us, Admiral," the scan officer reported. "Their largest ships are smaller than our fighters. Their space stations have minimal armament. They appear to be a typical primitive civilization." Then why the silence? Kethmorn wondered aloud. Deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, General Sarah Chun stood in the command center that had been secretly built over 70 years ago. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked at computer stations that monitored every aspect of the solar system. "Status report," she commanded. "All defense platforms are online and ready," reported Colonel Martinez. "The lunar installations are fully charged. Mars base confirms that all hunter-killer units have launched successfully." General Chun nodded as she studied the tactical display. For over 70 years, humanity had been preparing for this day. It had all started in 1947 when something crashed in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico. But it wasn't what people thought it was. The crashed object had been a scout ship from an alien empire. The military had recovered not just the ship, but its crew. Under interrogation, the aliens had revealed the existence of the Galactic HFY and their standard procedure for finding and conquering primitive worlds. The aliens had been scouts, sent ahead to study Earth before the main fleet arrived. But their ship had malfunctioned, and they had crashed before they could report back to their superiors. The hegemony assumed the ship had been lost in space, which happens sometimes in deep exploration, but humanity had captured intact alien technology and learned how to reverse engineer it. More importantly, they had learned about the hegemony's methods and psychology. The aliens were used to overwhelming primitive species with superior technology. They were not used to fighting enemies who knew they were coming. "General, the alien fleet is maintaining position at the edge of the system," reported the communications officer. "They appear to be waiting for some kind of response from us." "Let them wait," General Chun said. "Have all civilian populations reached the underground shelters?" "Yes, ma'am. Operation Silent Running is complete. As far as the aliens can tell, Earth has gone completely dark. For decades, humanity had built a secret network of underground cities and military installations. The moment alien ships appeared in the system, every civilian on the planet had moved into hardened bunkers deep beneath the surface. The aliens would see no signs of panic or preparation, just an eerily quiet world. Meanwhile, humanity's real defenses were powering up throughout the solar system. On the moon's dark side, massive railguns emerged from hidden installations. These weapons could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed, making them deadly even to ships with energy shields. In the asteroid belt, mining robots that had been working for decades suddenly revealed their true purpose. They had not been mining minerals for Earth's use. Instead, they had been hollowing out asteroids and filling them with antimatter warheads, guidance systems that had learned warfare by studying every human conflict in history now activated and began targeting the alien fleet. Most dangerous of all were the hunter-killer drones launching from Mars. These ships looked primitive from the outside, but they contained alien technology that humanity had improved upon. They were fast, smart, and completely expendable. "Admiral," the scanning officer called out on Kethmoran's ship, "I'm detecting some unusual movement in the asteroid belt." Kethmoran looked at the tactical display. "What kind of movement?" "The asteroids appear to be shifting position. It's very subtle, but several large rocks have changed their orbital patterns. Probably natural gravitational effects from our fleet's mass," the Admiral said dismissively. Primitive systems often have unstable asteroid belts. But as he watched, more reports came in. The objects orbiting Earth that they had identified as space junk were also moving. The tiny ships scattered throughout the system were changing position as well. "Sir," the tactical officer said nervously, "I think those objects are not as primitive as we thought." Before Cathmoran could respond, his communications officer started receiving signals again from Earth. But this time, it was not what any of them expected. The message came on every frequency simultaneously. It was broadcast in perfect Galactic Hegemony standard language, the official language that most council species used for communication. "This is General Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force," the voice said calmly. "You have entered our star system without permission and with hostile intent. You have exactly 10 minutes to begin withdrawing from our space. Any ship that remains after that deadline will be destroyed." The bridge fell silent. Cathmoran stared at the communication console in disbelief. "How do they know our language?" he whispered. The answer came immediately, as if the human had heard him. "We've been studying your kind for 70 years, General Chun's voice continued. "We know your technology, your tactics, and your psychology. We know you think we're primitive and helpless. You're about to learn otherwise." Cathmoran's tactical officer suddenly shouted in alarm. "Admiral, the objects we identified as space debris are powering up weapon systems. They're not debris at all. And sir," the scanning officer added, his voice shaking, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the third planet's moon. Whatever they've built there, it's as powerful as our main battle cruisers." Admiral Cathmoran realized with growing horror that his perfect intelligence about this primitive species had been completely wrong. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities from the scout ships. "Begin evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Signal the fleet to prepare for combat." But it was already too late. The first volley of railgun projectiles from the moon reached the outer ships of his fleet. The impacts were devastating. Ships that had served the hegemony for centuries were torn apart by kinetic weapons traveling at impossible speeds. The war for Earth had begun, and humanity had fired the first shot. Admiral Cathmoran watched in horror as 12,000 ships of his outer fleet simply vanished. The railgun projectiles from Earth's moon had torn through his vessels faster than his sensors could track. Ships that had survived countless battles over centuries were destroyed in seconds. "Damage report," he shouted over the chaos on his bridge. "Sir, we've lost contact with the entire outer perimeter," his communications officer reported, his voice shaking. "No survivors detected from any of the destroyed vessels." "How is this possible?" Cathmoran demanded. "These humans are supposed to be primitive." Before anyone could answer, another wave of destruction hit the fleet. The asteroids that had been slowly shifting position suddenly accelerated toward the remaining ships. As they approached, the rocks split open to reveal antimatter warheads, guided by sophisticated targeting systems. The explosions that followed lit up the darkness of space like new stars being born. Each blast took out dozens of hegemony ships at once. The Admiral's tactical display showed friendly contacts disappearing by the hundreds. "Sir," the scanning officer called out, "I'm detecting incoming fast attack craft from the direction of the fourth planet. Hundreds of them." Cathmoran looked at his display and saw a swarm of small ships approaching at incredible speed. They were moving faster than anything in the hegemony fleet, including his own fighters. "Launch all fighters," he ordered. "Intercept those attack craft before they reach our main formation." 3,000 hegemony fighters launched from the fleet's carriers and raced to meet the human ships. The two forces collided in a massive space battle that lit up the void with weapons fire. But something went wrong almost immediately. The human ships were not just fast and well-armed. They were smart. Too smart. Admiral, his fighter wing commander, reported over the radio. These enemy craft are predicting our attack patterns. They know what we're going to do before we do it. Keth Morin watched as his fighters were systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to read their minds. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, always striking at the weakest point in his formations. What the Admiral didn't know was that humanity had spent decades studying every battle the hegemony had ever fought. Their artificial intelligence systems had analyzed millions of hours of combat footage, learning how each alien species fought, what tactics they preferred, and what mistakes they always made. The human ships were not just guided by pilots. They were controlled by AI systems that had learned warfare from the most violent species in the galaxy. Humanity itself died as his fleet continued to suffer massive losses. Admiral Keth Morin made a decision that would haunt him forever. He opened a communication channel to all ships in his fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Keth Morin. We are facing an unexpectedly advanced enemy. All ships are authorized to use maximum firepower. Target their planet directly. End this quickly. But as soon as he sent that message, something terrible happened. Every communication channel in his fleet was suddenly flooded with transmissions from Earth. "Attention ships of the Hegemony Third Fleet," came a calm human voice. "This is Commander Jackson of Earth Intelligence. We have been monitoring your communications for the past hour. We know the name, species, and personal history of every being on every ship in your fleet." The bridge fell silent. This was impossible. The hegemony used encrypted communications that took even their own experts days to decode. For example, the human voice continued. "Admiral Keth Morin, born on Feclor Prime. You have 3 offspring and a bondmate named Isolara. Your eldest child just started military academy last year. Your second child wants to be an artist, which worries you. Your youngest is still learning to walk." Keth Morin felt his blood turn cold. This information was not stored on his ship's computers. The humans could not possibly know these details about his family. Or perhaps Communications Officer Nethak, the voice continued, who has been hiding his addiction to stim pods from his crew. Or Tactical Officer Morvan, who was secretly sending money to support his sister's medical treatments. All across the fleet, crew members began looking at each other with suspicion and fear. How did the humans know so much about their personal lives? "We know about you because we captured one of your scout ships 70 years ago, the human explained. "The crew told us everything about your society, your military, and your psychology. We know which species hate each other, which crews will break under pressure, and which commanders will sacrifice their own people to save themselves." The Admiral tried to cut off the transmission, but it was coming through on every frequency simultaneously. The humans had somehow taken control of his entire communication system. For example, the voice continued. "We know that the Kithmani crews blame the Vordak species for starting the war that destroyed their homeworld 300 years ago. We know that Zeftos commanders consider Dekalon warriors to be cowards. We know that most of your crews joined the hegemony only because they were conquered and had no choice." Admiral Keth Morin realized what the humans were doing. They were not just attacking his ships. They were attacking the unity of his fleet. "Attention Vortak vessels," another human voice said on a different frequency. "The Kithmani ships in your fleet are planning to ram your position and blame it on human attack craft. We're transmitting their tactical communications now." Suddenly, intercepted messages began playing over the fleet's communication system. Whether they were real or fake, Keth Morin could not tell, but they sounded authentic. Kithmani crew members could be heard discussing their hatred of their Vortak allies. Within minutes, ships began breaking formation. Vortak vessels started targeting Kithmani ships instead of human forces. Other species began choosing sides or trying to flee the battle entirely. All ships maintained formation. Kethmoran ordered desperately, "Do not listen to human propaganda." But it was too late. The humans had found the cracks in his fleet's unity and were tearing them wide open. 700 years of hegemony rule had been maintained through fear and force, not loyalty. When that fear was turned against itself, the alliance crumbled. Admiral, his tactical officer, reported, "We're receiving reports of mutinies on 17 ships. The Zeftos crews are trying to surrender to the humans. The Kithmani and Vortak squadrons are engaging each other directly." More human voices began broadcasting on different frequencies, each one speaking directly to specific ships or even individual crew members. Maintenance Tech Euriliak of the battleship Dominar, a human, said, "We know you've been sabotaging your ship's weapon systems because you don't want to kill innocent people. We're offering safe passage to any crew member who helps us end this battle peacefully." Engineer Sefton of the cruiser Corollis, another human, added, "Your government destroyed your family's farm to build a military base. You joined the fleet to survive, not to conquer others. You don't have to die for people who never cared about you." All across the fleet, crew members began to question why they were fighting. Many had been conquered by the hegemony themselves. Others had joined only because they needed jobs or food. Few had any real loyalty to the council. The humans seemed to know exactly what to say to each person, which fears to exploit, which hopes to encourage. It was psychological warfare on a scale the Admiral had never imagined possible. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "I'm receiving surrender requests from over 3,000 ships. They want to negotiate with the humans directly." Admiral Kethmoran looked at his tactical display and saw his fleet falling apart. Ships were fighting each other, fleeing the system, or trying to surrender. His perfect invasion force had become a chaotic mob in less than 2 hours. How did they know so much about us? He whispered. The answer came immediately from Earth. "We know about you because we're good at learning about our enemies," General Chum's voice said calmly. "We've been fighting wars for our entire history. We know how to find weakness, how to exploit fear, and how to turn allies against each other. You may have better technology, but we understand something you've forgotten during your centuries of peace." "What's that?" the Admiral asked, even though he knew he shouldn't engage with the enemy. "We understand that everyone has a breaking point," the General replied, "and we're very good at finding it." The bridge of Admiral Kethmoran's flagship had become a scene of chaos. Warning lights flashed red as reports poured in from across the fleet. What had started as an overwhelming invasion force was now scattered fragments fighting each other more than the humans. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, his voice barely controlled, "we now have confirmed mutinies on 47 ships. The entire Yith-Ara squadron has surrendered to the humans. 3 Kithmani battlegroups are engaged in open warfare with Vortak forces." Kethmoran stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In his 300 years of military service, he had never seen a fleet destroy itself so quickly. The humans had barely fired their weapons for the past hour, yet his forces continued to shrink. "What about our communications?" he asked desperately. "Can we block their transmissions?" "Negative, sir," a communications officer replied. "They're somehow using our own relay systems against us. Every time we try to cut them off, they find another pathway. It's as if they understand our technology better than we do." That was exactly what was happening. For 70 years, human engineers had studied captured hegemony equipment. They had not just learned how it worked, they had found ways to improve it. The alien scout ship that crashed at Roswell had given humanity a head start that the hegemony could not have imagined. More importantly, humans had done something the hegemony never expected. They had shared their knowledge freely among themselves instead of hoarding it for military advantage. While alien species guarded their technology jealously, humanity had created a global network of scientists and engineers working together. Admiral, came a new voice over the communication system. This is Dr. Sarah Kim of the Human Research Division. We've been analyzing your fleet composition for the past hour. Would you like to know what we've learned? Katmarn wanted to ignore the transmission, but something in the human's tone made him listen. Your fleet contains representatives from 37 different species, Dr. Kim continued. But only 9 of those species joined the hegemony voluntarily. The other 28 were conquered and forced to serve. Many of their homeworlds were destroyed or strip-mined for resources. The Admiral felt a chill run through him. This information was classified at the highest levels of hegemony command. We've also discovered something interesting about your promotion system, the human scientist continued. Officers from conquered species almost never rise above middle rank, no matter how skilled they are. The best positions are reserved for the founding council races. This has created significant resentment among your crew. Across the fleet, alien crew members began to realize that their human enemies knew more about hegemony politics than they did themselves. Worse, the humans were broadcasting this information on channels that everyone could hear. For example, Dr. Kim said, Tactical Officer Morvan, you've been passed over for promotion 6 times, despite having the highest test scores in your academy class. The reason is simple. Your species is classified as a support race, rather than a leadership race in hegemony files. Engineering Chief Krolan, another human voice added, Your homeworld's population was reduced by 80% during hegemony integration. Your family was relocated to work in mining colonies. You joined the fleet because it was the only way to leave that planet. All across the fleet, similar revelations were being broadcast to individual crew members. The humans had somehow obtained detailed personnel files for the entire Third Fleet. They knew who had been promoted unfairly, who had been held back because of their species, and who had family members suffering under hegemony rule. But the psychological assault was just beginning. Attention all hegemony personnel. General Chun's voice cut through the chaos. We are now broadcasting the complete historical records of your government's expansion policies. These files were classified by your own leaders to prevent you from learning the truth about how your empire was built. Suddenly, every communication screen in the fleet began displaying documents that detailed the hegemony's true history. The official version taught to military personnel was that the hegemony had brought peace and order to a chaotic galaxy. The reality was very different. The file showed species after species being conquered, their populations enslaved or killed, their worlds strip-mined for resources. They showed how the Council deliberately kept different species suspicious of each other to prevent unity. They showed how conquered peoples were forced to fight in hegemony armies against other victims. These are lies, Admiral Kethmorn broadcast to his fleet. Human propaganda designed to weaken our resolve. Admiral, General Chun responded immediately. These documents came from your own ship's database. We extracted them from your command computers during our initial cyber attack. Your own government's files prove that everything we're saying is true. The Admiral checked his computer systems and discovered with horror that the humans were right. His own classified files had been accessed and copied. Security systems that were supposed to be unbreakable had been compromised completely. Worse, the humans were now broadcasting these files to every hegemony world within communication range. Across the galaxy, conquered species were learning for the first time how thoroughly they had been lied to and manipulated. Sir, the communications officer said quietly, we're receiving emergency transmissions from Hegemony High Command. There are reports of uprisings on 17 worlds. The Kithmani homeworld has declared independence. 3 other systems are demanding the Council's immediate surrender. The Admiral realized that humanity had not just attacked his fleet. They had attacked the entire foundation of hegemony rule. By revealing the truth about how the Empire operated, they had triggered revolutions across thousands of star systems. How did they get our classified files? He asked his security chief. Sir, the security officer replied nervously. Our analysis suggests they've had access to our systems for much longer than we realized. The cyber attack didn't start when their fleet appeared. It started when we entered their system. Possibly earlier. What do you mean? Sir, we think they've been inside our computer networks for months. Maybe years. Every time one of our scout ships approached their system, they infected it with hidden programs. When those ships returned to base and connected to fleet networks, the program spread. Cathmoran felt his world crashing down around him. You're saying they've been watching us the entire time? Yes, sir. They knew we were coming. They knew our fleet composition, our battle plans, everything. This entire invasion was a trap. The revelation was confirmed when General Chun's voice returned to the communications system. Admiral Cathmoran, she said calmly. Your scout ship TK-7739 made first contact with our outer monitoring stations 8 months ago. We've been tracking your preparations ever since. We know about your backup fleets, your supply lines, and your contingency plans. We also know that the Hegemony Council is meeting an emergency session right now to decide whether to abandon you entirely. The Admiral's tactical officer suddenly looked up from his console. Sir, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Hegemony High Command. Put it through, Cathmoran ordered. The face of Council Speaker Vexthari appeared on the main screen. He looked panicked and exhausted. Admiral, Vexthari said without preamble, you are ordered to withdraw immediately. The Council is recalling all military forces to defend the core worlds. The situation throughout the Empire has become unstable. Sir, what about the mission? Cathmoran asked. What about integrating the human system? Vexthari's expression grew grim. Admiral, there may not be an empire left to integrate them into. The humans have broadcast our classified files to every world in hegemony space. We have revolutions breaking out everywhere. Some of our own founding species are demanding answers about policies they were never told about. The Admiral looked around his bridge at crew members from a dozen different species. Many of them were no longer looking at him with respect or fear. Instead, they were looking at him with anger and resentment. Sir, Vexthari continued, withdraw what remains of your fleet immediately. That is a direct order from the Council. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. All ships, Admiral Cathmoran announced to his scattered fleet, prepare for immediate withdrawal. We are returning to hegemony space. But General Chun's voice cut through his orders one more time. Admiral, she said, you're welcome to leave. But we should mention that we've sent copies of these files to every species in the galaxy, including those outside hegemony space. By the time you reach home, you may find that there's no home left to return to. As the remaining ships of the Third Fleet began their retreat, Admiral Cathmoran realized that humanity had done something no enemy had ever accomplished. They had not just defeated a hegemony fleet. They had destroyed the entire basis for hegemony rule. The humans had turned their own information against them. And the empire that had ruled the galaxy for 7 centuries was beginning to collapse from within. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the crystal towers of Zentara Prime lay in ruins. The great capital of the galactic hegemony had fallen not to enemy bombardment, but to the rage of its own citizens. Former slaves and conquered peoples had torn apart the government that had oppressed them for centuries. General Sarah Chun stood in what had once been the council chambers, looking out through shattered crystal walls at the city below. Smoke still rose from some districts where fighting continued between different factions of liberated species. "General," Colonel Martinez said as he approached with a data tablet. "The final casualty reports are in from across the former hegemony space." Chun took the tablet and scanned the numbers. The death toll was massive, but not from military action. Most casualties had come from the revolutions that erupted on thousands of worlds when the truth about hegemony rule was revealed. "What about Admiral Kethmoran?" she asked. "He made it back to Thekla Prime with about 8,000 ships," Martinez replied. "But his own government arrested him for losing the fleet. He's being held responsible for the collapse of the Empire." Chun shook her head. "He was just following orders. The Council made the decision to invade us." "Speaking of the Council," Martinez said, "we've confirmed the deaths of 12 of the 14 original members. Speaker Vexthari and Councilor Morthek are in hiding somewhere in the Outer Rim. There's a bounty on their heads from at least 30 different liberation movements." The general walked to what had been the Council's meeting table. The energy construct had been destroyed, but she could imagine the arrogant beings who had once sat here, casually deciding the fate of entire species. "Any word from Ambassador Rodriguez?" Chan asked. "She's still meeting with representatives from the various liberation movements," Martinez replied. "They're having trouble agreeing on how to organize a new government. 700 years of hegemony rule left most species with no experience in self-governance. That was the problem humanity now faced. By destroying the hegemony, they had liberated billions of people across thousands of star systems. But freedom and chaos were often the same thing. At least initially, the aftermath had been both worse and better than Earth's leaders had expected. Worse, because the violence had spread far beyond what they had planned. Better, because humanity's role as liberators rather than conquerors had earned them respect and gratitude from most of the galaxy. "General," a new voice said from behind her. Chum turned to see Captain Lisa Park, one of Earth's new diplomatic officers. "The Democratic Alliance representatives are ready for your address." Chun nodded and followed Park to a larger chamber where holographic projectors had been set up. On the screens, she could see representatives from hundreds of different species, all linked together through quantum communication networks that humanity had helped establish. This was the new order emerging from the ashes of the old empire. Instead of one central government ruling through force, the galaxy was organizing itself into voluntary alliances of free worlds. "Delegates," General Chun said as she stepped up to the podium, "thank you for joining today's session. I know many of your worlds are still dealing with the transition from hegemony rule to independence." The response came in dozens of different languages, translated instantly by AI systems that humanity had shared freely. Unlike the hegemony, which had forced everyone to use their official language, the new alliance embraced diversity. "Today," Chun continued, "we want to address concerns that have been raised about Earth's role in galactic affairs. Some of you have asked whether humanity intends to replace the hegemony as the dominant power in this region of space." She paused and looked directly into the cameras that were broadcasting her words across the galaxy. "The answer is no," she said firmly. "Earth has no desire to rule over other worlds or species. We fought the hegemony because they threatened our home and our freedom. We shared information about their crimes because all sentient beings deserve to know the truth about their governments." Ambassador Maria Rodriguez stepped up to join her at the podium. Rodriguez had been chosen specifically for this role because she understood both military strategy and diplomatic negotiation. "However," Rodriguez said, "we also recognize that freedom without security is meaningless. The galaxy needs some form of organization to prevent future conflicts and protect the rights of all species." The two women had spent months developing Earth's post-war strategy. Unlike the hegemony, which had governed through fear and oppression. Humanity wanted to build something based on mutual cooperation and shared benefit. Therefore, Rodriguez continued, Earth proposes the formation of a new galactic alliance based on the following principles. First, voluntary membership. No world or species will be forced to join. Second, equal representation, regardless of military or economic power. Third, mutual defense against external threats. Fourth, free trade and cultural exchange among member worlds. The reaction was immediate and varied. Some species cheered the proposal. Others expressed skepticism. A few demanded guarantees that Earth would not use its military advantages to dominate the alliance. I understand your concerns, General Chun said, addressing the skeptics directly. You have no reason to trust any powerful species after what the hegemony did to you. That's why Earth is prepared to make binding commitments. She gestured to Rodriguez, who activated a new holographic display. The image showed Earth's solar system, but with significant changes from 6 months earlier. As proof of our commitment to peaceful cooperation, Rodriguez announced, Earth is dismantling our wartime defenses. The orbital weapons platforms that destroyed the hegemony fleet are being converted into research stations and communications hubs for the alliance. The announcement caused surprised murmurs throughout the chamber. The weapons that had defeated the galaxy's most powerful military were being voluntarily destroyed by their creators. Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, Earth is sharing all technology used in our defense, including our computer systems, our manufacturing techniques, and our military strategies. This information will be available to all Alliance members to ensure that no single species maintains a technological advantage. This was perhaps the most radical part of Earth's proposal. Throughout galactic history, advanced species had always hoarded their technology to maintain dominance over others. The idea of freely sharing military secrets was almost incomprehensible to most aliens. But why? Asked Delegate Krilliana of the Vortax species. Why give up advantages that you earned through your own efforts? General Chun smiled. This was the question she had been hoping someone would ask. Because we learned something important during our war with the hegemony, she replied. The strongest defense is not walls or weapons. It's having friends who want to help you when enemies appear. She gestured to the display showing the battle 6 months earlier. Earth's real advantage was not our technology or our weapons. It was our understanding of how to build cooperation among different groups. The hegemony failed because they ruled through fear and division. They made enemies of everyone they conquered. Earth's strategy from the beginning was to turn the hegemony's diversity into our advantage, Rodriguez added. Instead of fighting 37 different species, we helped those species realize they were fighting for people who despised them. Delegate Sefmira of the Kithmani raised a tentacle. You're saying that unity is stronger than domination? Exactly, Chun replied. The hegemony controlled the galaxy for 700 years because they had the biggest fleet and the most advanced weapons. But they fell in 6 months once their subjects realized they didn't have to obey. The general walked closer to the camera, speaking directly to viewers across the galaxy. We learned from your example, she said. Every species in this room fought for their freedom once they understood they had a choice. Earth just helped you realize what choice you wanted to make. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered this perspective. For most of them, the idea that their liberators saw them as teachers rather than subjects was completely new. So what happens now? Asked Delegate Morvac of the Zeftos people. Now, Ambassador Rodriguez replied, we build something better. Not an empire ruled by fear, but an alliance built on trust. Not conquest and domination, but cooperation and mutual benefit. She activated another display showing star charts with proposed trade routes. communication networks, and defense agreements between willing participants. The old empire is dead, General Chun said firmly. The question is what we build to replace it. Earth offers our friendship and partnership to any species that wants it. But the future of this galaxy belongs to all of us together, not to any single world or government. The response was not immediate unanimous agreement. Democracy is slower than dictatorship, and building consensus among hundreds of different species would take time. But the foundation had been laid for something unprecedented in galactic history. Later, as the formal session ended and delegates signed up for working committees, General Chun stood once again at the shattered window of the former council chamber. Think it will work? Colonel Martinez asked as he joined her. Chun looked out at the ruins of the old empire and the busy construction of New Alliance headquarters in the distance. I don't know, she replied honestly.